Hey, everybody, and welcome to the, I guess, Point North official launch live stream. This is a little more ramshackle and last minute than I expected it to be because some of you who have been paying attention on Twitter may have noticed that we had a little technical trouble with the website earlier today. It turns out, and it gives me a certain amount of pride and satisfaction to say this, that the launch of Point North was extremely popular. Specifically, the announcement of the American Gods seminar schedule was extremely popular, and you guys kind of broke the site for a little while. That is a fantastic thing. There was no better way of starting your day than that. Believe me, however, it did mean that I had to go in and monkey a little with the code to make the website work again. It is now back. It is now working. All is well. You can find everything over there at pointnorthmedia.com, though I will admit it is a little bare bones at the moment. In fact, you know what? Why don't I elaborately screen share this with you so that you can see exactly what it is that I'm talking about, since this is the launch and all. Guys, thank you all so much for coming and hanging out tonight. This is going to be a regular deal, actually. I'm planning on having a half hour, 45-minute, hour-long Q&A live stream every Friday. I think that's a really great way to stay connected with you guys, to stay connected with what you're looking for from Point North, and to keep you up to speed with a lot of my my plans for the future. So this, if you haven't seen it yet, is what Point North looks like. You'll see here at the top, very simple menu for home and shows. I'm signed in. You won't normally get the little WordPress thing here at the top. This is a professional setup, you guys. You can see the spike in the traffic that broke the site earlier. You can see the services page and the about page. None of those are really particularly full-featured, let's say, right now, but they're going to be. It's all going to be fine. Here you can see the latest episode of There and Back Again, Beneath the Lonely Mountain. That was last night's live session. Those of you who were here with me last night are probably aware that I sound much better today. Last night, my voice really struggled to do 90 minutes of the live session and then pretty much broke immediately afterward. But today, hey, you guys, I'm feeling much better. Also, you'll see here, Storms on the Way. This is the title for our American Gods seminar series, and I am beyond excited to get into this book. I've been rereading it just as a means of refreshing my palate, effectively, to kind of re-immerse myself into this incredibly unique, incredibly specific, incredibly architected and thoughtful world that nonetheless contains within it this coiled kineticism, this physical kineticism at the heart of the story. I am loving my reread, I have to admit, and I'm really looking forward to discussing it all with you. We'll talk a little more about the specifics of that in just a second. If you scroll down the main page, you'll be able to see here a very familiar looking newsletter sign-up sheet. Every Monday, I will be sending out a This Week on Point North update to you all to make sure that you don't miss any announcements. That will not be spam. I mean, unless you consider the whole thing spam, which I guess you could. But if you do, then don't sign up for it. It's fine. But that will contain a full schedule for the week. And I'm also hoping within the next few days to get a longer form schedule available on the site so that I can talk with more specificity and a little more ambition about my plans for later in the year. I've traditionally kind of done one seminar at a time, and that doesn't necessarily give me enough space to plan what comes next. So I'm hoping that by planning a little more carefully into the future, 2 or 3 seminars down the line, I'll be able to do more prep work, more advanced work, and simply produce more shows. Obviously, that's what excites me the most. Next to that, you will see the little call out box here to suggest that you support me on Patreon, which you find folks already do, which is a lovely thing. And underneath that, you'll find all of the social media icons. Most of those are up. Some of them may not be completely complete just yet. I'm not sure that I filled out my Instagram profile, but I will get to it. I had to claim the namespaces, and that's the important thing. Beneath that, you'll see callouts from the blog, Storms on the Way. The announcement is there too, of course, and the Welcome to Point North, very simple post that you have to put into WordPress so that you have something to edit and make sure it looks nice. But what's most exciting here for me is this introduction to my series, Watching Marble Hornets. Those of you who followed my blog over on alistairstevens.com back in the day may remember me writing a series of long-form essays. Well, they started off as long-form essays. They got longer and longer form about the internet horror series Marble Hornets. I never finished that series because I started to lose a little momentum as Marble Hornets moved toward the end of its 3rd season. And at the same time, I was aware that the work that I was doing toward the end of the series was deeper and more ambitious and more sophisticated than the work I was doing at the beginning. So what I want to do is go back and rewrite the entire thing in large part, edit, I guess, the entire thing, and then finish it. So over the course of the next probably about 20 weeks, 22 weeks, something like that, we're going to discuss the entirety of Marble Hornets. That new blog post will go up every Saturday morning. It will have the videos embedded, so you'll be able to watch Marble Hornets along with me and my commentary effectively. I'm really excited. I can't wait to get into that. That is it for the website. Basically, there are some links here at the bottom. There's the Twitter stream at the bottom. I'm going to build this out over the course of the next few weeks, but right now this is functional. And that's enough to ask for. So let's take a look at the American Gods seminar setup that we have here. As you'll see here, if you've already looked at it, this is going to run for 19 sessions across something like, what did I say? Something like 10 weeks, I think. Basically, what's going to happen is we're going to get a head start on the book starting the first Tuesday in April. We're going to do 4 weekly sessions looking at the book. That will take us up to the end of chapter 8. And the following week, American Gods, the TV show, actually launches. So my plan is that on Monday, I'm going to have a live stream response to the episode with some Q&A, with some discussion. That's probably only going to run around 30 or 40 minutes. I can't imagine it running much longer than that. And then on Tuesday, we'll have the next chunk of the book. That's going to be a standard seminar. So that's going to be 90 minutes to 2 hours, I imagine. In this way, by this means, we are going to explore both the book and the adaptation of the book as they unfold effectively in parallel. We're going to be out ahead with the book, so we're not going to hit any major spoilers in the show, hopefully, before we get to them in the book. But this is going to give us an unparalleled opportunity to look at the process of adaptation live, as it were, which I find really stimulating. I find that really exciting. We've had some discussion in the past about adaptation in a removed academic kind of sense. Those of you who, of course, were with me through Outlander and Dragonfly and Amber and then into Voyager have heard me talk about adaptation, the adaptation of a book that is 20 years old. Now, of course, this book is very old too, but the adaptation is live. It's going to be unfolding alongside us, and that's enormously thrilling. I can't wait to get into that. Vinton here in the chat, the wonderful Vinton says, I hope I can keep up with that rereading American Gods. I don't have enough time for a reread this month. Well, good news. It doesn't start until April. You've got like a whole week and a half, I guess. It's going to be fine. It's going to be just fine. Oh, and Angela says that she bought the 10th anniversary full cast audiobook. That thing is amazing. I can't recommend that highly enough. It is behind me here, right next to the whiskey on the shelf behind me. You can see the author's preferred edition. This is actually the 10th anniversary edition that we're going to be using, but pretty much, honestly, any version of American Gods will work. The changes are interesting in their way, but not perhaps as illuminative as they might otherwise be. It's still a perfectly functional book if you have the original text. Yeah, good. Excellent. So this is what is happening at Point North. I should show too, while I think of it, I meant to already have this called up, but I added a couple of stretch goals over on the Patreon page. I wanted to show you those too. Here is my Patreon page where you can see that 248 of you are currently pledging a total of $744 per month, which is, let me be completely clear, you guys, this is extraordinary. This is unparalleled. I didn't expect support of anything like this magnitude, and it is humbling, and it is awesome, and it is fantastic. And I am already now basically a year ahead of where I wanted to be with regard to the work that I'm doing at Point North. I'm already thinking about some genuinely ambitious projects that will take place within the next 8, 9, 10 months, somewhere within that window. And that is really, really exciting because your support makes it possible for me to do all of this work. And as I hope you know by now, I will do a lot of work. So we're already moving toward our next milestone here. Oh, perhaps before we get to that, I should talk a little about the dollar amount that is visible on the Patreon page, because I made a decision when I launched the Patreon page last week to, I guess conceal is the technical term. That makes it sound a little shady, perhaps, but to prefer the information regarding the number of patrons of Point North over the information regarding the dollar amount that has been pledged. And my thought was simply that focusing on the number of patrons rather than the amount of money speaks to this community that we are building. It speaks to this notional symposium, which we are all attending, this grand country house where we all get to hang out and have these fantastic conversations about books and TV shows and art and poetry and all the things that will flow forth, hopefully, within the next year from Point North. That sense of community is really important to me. That sense of community is what inspires me to do this work. It's what inspires me to have these conversations. I mean, don't get me wrong, I would still be thinking about J.R.R. Tolkien if I was sitting in a room by myself drinking this rather excellent scotch, but I'm not. I'm having that conversation with all of you, and the community aspect of Point North, the community aspect of these seminars and podcast series is what drives me. So thinking about that in terms of the community, I thought that preferring that information on the Patreon page might be more representative. It might be more, I don't know, it might speak more clearly to the authentic Point North experience, whatever that may be in time. But there has been some discussion over on the Patreon page about transparency, which I think is completely legitimate. And if there were a way that I could prioritize the number of patrons and also present the financial information, then that might be a perfect compromise, but there isn't. So I kind of have to choose one or the other. I think what I'm going to do is simply, because transparency is so important, and because I absolutely respect the right of everyone who supports Point North to know more about what is going on with Point North, we're going to do a couple of things. I think for now, I'm going to keep it as the number of patrons on the Patreon page, but I see no reason why I can't show you the screen every time we do a live chat every Friday when we hang out. I don't think that there's a problem with transparency. It certainly wasn't a desire to obfuscate the information that led to the choice that I made, but I think that prioritizing community and the number of patrons among our number, that feels like a better choice to me on the page. At least that should be the first point of contact for people who are coming to Point North. That is still a work in progress. That's still in flux. Absolutely, if you have strong feelings about it, get in touch and talk to me about it. I find it completely fascinating. From an abstract academic perspective, I find it completely fascinating because it speaks so directly to how we represent ourselves and how we think of, I was going to say art. I mean art perhaps in the broadest sense, in that I am creating something, but this kind of analysis, this kind of conversation, this kind of discourse, this is, I mean, it's unusual. You guys have been out on the internet. You know that in most places, most people don't talk the way that we talk. They don't talk to each other the way that you talk to each other. The internet can be a contentious and fractured place. And I'm extremely proud of the community that we have forged here. This odd wonk diaspora that has spread out across Twitter and carried podcasting with it. That is perhaps the thing of which I am most proud in my entire life. The very small and minor part that I played in the formation and the guiding of that community in its earliest days. And I want to do what I can to continue that as we continue to move forward with Point North. So just to check in, for now, I think we'll just keep the number of patrons on the Patreon page. But because this really isn't about transparency or about obfuscating this information, I'll be completely upfront with you guys every week, and we'll talk about the stretch goals and stuff like that right here in the live Q&A. Do let me know if that sounds good or if that sounds, you know, somewhat less than good. Yes. Rachel Newbury asks, before I go back to the Patreon page and show you the new stretch goals, Rachel Newbury asks, any thoughts or plans on live tweets for the show? I take it we're talking about American Gods. Yes, here's the problem. It's dependent on one very important thing. And that very important thing is the utility of the STARS app. Those of you who've been keeping up with the fantastic Black Sails podcast Fathoms Deep from friends of the show, Common Room Radio, from Liz Stevens and from Daphne Olive, if you've been keeping up with their show, you'll know that STARS releases Black Sails digitally through their app a whole day before it actually airs on conventional television. And STARS has done this before with Outlander 2. If STARS does this for American Gods, if it's available through the app prior to its network broadcast, then yes, I think live tweets are a genuinely great idea because we can all watch it in advance and then live tweet the thing as it's going out. But otherwise, we end up live tweeting something the first time that we're watching it, and that isn't necessarily the best way of absorbing the show, of being absorbed by the show, I suppose. So it's dependent on that, but yes, absolutely. Let me see here. What other questions do we have? Megan says, if you could replace the word community with fellowship, I think we'd all be more comfortable with that. Fellowship. I like that. Fellowship is rather good. Good. Let's see. Yes, great. Vincent and Mandy here, you guys are all fantastic. This is all good. very supportive. This is wonderful. Yes, and Sarah says, but only the US can get stars. The rest of us are delayed. Yes, unfortunately, that is. You may have seen that complicated infographic that has been going around, telling people around the world exactly how they can see American Gods. You guys, if I was in charge of stars, things would be very different, let me tell you. But I probably wouldn't have enough time to podcast. I wouldn't have as much time to podcast, let's be honest. Okay, yes. I actually love fellowship, guys. I'm perfectly happy right now to say that we are adopting the Point North Fellowship. If you want to be fellows of Point North, I am in. I am here for that. We can make that happen. I'm using producers and senior producers and executive producers over on the Patreon page right now. I'm not crazy about that, but I like fellowship a lot more, so we can make that happen. Good. Okay, let me show you back to the Patreon page so that I can talk a little about the intermittent, I suppose, goals, the temporary goals that I have set up here. The very next goal that we're looking toward is basically a milestone that allows me to upgrade my video production features here. I run this entire thing off of a I'm going to have trouble remembering the name of the webcam, but it's a little Logitech. I think it's the Logitech HD Premium webcam. It's a solid little webcam, but it's also, a webcam. And there are compromises that you make in terms of video quality, in terms of the lenses, in terms of the way that it handles the ambient light in the room. The video does not look as good as it should. It doesn't look as sharp as it should. Video. So when we hit the next milestone, I'm looking at buying a real camera, I guess I say a real camera. What I mean is a prosumer grade camera, something that can output really good HD video, give really good color depth, give really good sharp lines, really good white balancing. That's going to be fantastic. And of course, having that camera will allow me to shoot in some other locations too. I'll be able to get away from my computer from time to time and perhaps do more spontaneous video blogs or more spontaneous live streams. We'll see how all of that works out. Yes. The goal after that is one that I have been looking forward to for a very long time. When we hit the next goal, which is at $1,500, we will celebrate by launching an in-depth series looking at both the movie and the novel versions of The Princess Bride. And as it says here, build up your immunity to iocane powder and join the party in the fire swamp. Talking about adaptation through the lens of American Gods is going to be fantastic, but there is perhaps no text which speaks more interestingly and more ambitiously on the subject of adaptation than The Princess Bride. And that's not just because there is a book and then there was a movie, though that's certainly true, but The Princess Bride is a constant exercise in adaptation with represented, I should say, as a reflection on a classic fairy tale by a modern scholar. It is not that, and yet in a sense it is absolutely that. Even the movie with its fictional frame manages to offer an ongoing commentary. It has a reflexive discourse with its own subject as it proceeds. And guys, I've got to tell you, that is endlessly, boundlessly fascinating to me. So the plan when we hit that milestone is pretty much to do this immediately. I don't think we need to plan this too far out. It's probably going to take place, I don't know why, but that feels like a Sunday afternoon kind of thing. We'll have to wait and see how that works out. But certainly it's going to be, I think, 4 sessions probably on the book, then maybe 2 sessions on the movie, live Q&A, that kind of thing. It's going to be a lot of fun. So I hope you'll be with me for that. Is the novel sad, asks Frau Castorp. No, absolutely not. The novel is... is the novel sad? No, I don't think so. No, I wouldn't describe it as sad. It has a fairy tale melancholy at certain parts, a sense of, a sense of fantastical melancholy, an almost kind of an almost gothic sensibility to it. I mean, not gothic, but kind of tiptoeing hesitantly toward gothic at certain parts. But overall, no, absolutely not. It's a rollicking good time. Yes. Good. It is not happy, says Tamara Moss. Yes, also true, I think. But see, I don't want to get into this too much now, I suppose. But part of the purpose, I think, of the disconnect between the text itself and the commentary about the text which runs alongside it is simply that we are never allowed to enter primarily into that secondary world. We're never allowed to enter into the fictional frame as completely as we might if the text within the text was presented as a straight story. We're always kept at one remove, and that allows for the creation of a certain amount of levity. And for those of you who haven't read the book, of course, we see that same practice in the movie version when Buttercup falls into the water and we interrupt the narrative so that Peter Falk can reassure his grandson that she does not get eaten by the eels at this time. That's exactly the kind of deliberate alienation that we employ in the book in order to remove the reader from that primary experience. And that's, again, not cheap, that's not simple, that's incredibly sophisticated and ambitious, and is emblematic of the kind of craft that went into the creation of this book, and ultimately, of course, the creation of the movie too. Frau Castorp also says, I like the movie better. Yes. That may be true for most people, I think. I'm pretty happy to have both of them, I have to say, because they are so different. Yes. Good. The novel is not like the movie, says Tamara Moss. No, that's absolutely true. It is very, very different. Black Sails is on Netflix here in Spain, says Frau Castorp. I didn't know that. That's fascinating. I guess it's on, is it on Netflix here? Is it on Hulu here? I think it's on Hulu here. Maybe the first 3 seasons. But yes, the Stars app releases like the day before the new episode becomes available so that internet folks can start tweeting about it, and people who watch it as it's broadcast can avoid Twitter for 24 hours. It's an odd choice, you guys. I'm not quite sure why we do that, but I'm glad that we do. I'm glad that we do. Good, good, good. All right. So I wanted to, well, Mandy's asking a really interesting question here. Will we get a Point North Discord? I'd rather have a dedicated spot to chat about your new stuff. Yes, I think so. I was thinking about Discord. I've been thinking about forum software. I've been thinking about ways in which we can have this discussion. We can have these ongoing conversations. And one of the things that I mentioned in the previous live stream, the live stream that I did for Storywalk, to bring that to an end and to pre-launch, I suppose, Point North. One of the things that I talked about was a desire on my part to further democratize this process. And this is something that I think if you guys have strong ideas about, if you have strong preferences about, I'd really like you to get in touch with me and give me your perspectives on this. For everything, I should say, you can email pointnorthmedia@gmail.com. You can use the contact form on the website. You can find me online, on Twitter, at least at pointnorthmedia, or just come find me at Paper Bullets. There's really no separation between those two things. They're both me. It's fine. One of the things that I'm really interested in doing is democratizing that flow, that conversation in the pre-seminar phase. As we're deciding not even which book we're going to cover next, but which books are going to be on the short list, I'd really like to create a space where people can stump for their books, for their chosen texts, so that if you feel very strongly about covering Audrey Niffenegger's The Time Traveler's Wife, for example, which I know many of you do, then I would like to create somehow a space where you can really pitch that, where you can really sell it, maybe in a minute or 2 or 3, maybe a YouTube video, maybe a voicemail clip, something that I can then broadcast out to the community so that this discussion can be about more than my own personal interests, I guess. Because though I guess it is necessary for me to have an interest in the book, it is necessary for me to have something to say about the book, I think that there's a certain innate bias, and I'd love to see that conversation simply flow more freely. I'd love to see that discussion be more direct and purposeful with you guys, among you guys. And of course, everyone who supports Point North on Patreon is going to have voting rights in whatever we do next. So that at least is preserved. Every time we cycle around to a new seminar topic, okay, not every time, I'm going to do Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I'm going to do all of the Harry Potter. In fact, there's a very good chance that I'm going to do Drums of Autumn at some point within the next 2 years. We will see how the whole Outlander series shakes out. I'm not entirely sure about that, but we'll get to it when the time comes. Apart from things to which I am already pre-committed, all of these things are going to be available for public vote and public record, but I would like to draw you guys into that discussion, to have the fellowship itself dictate the course of Point North. That to me is really exciting. So, we'll talk about forums and Discord channels, and honestly, I'm very tempted right now. And this, I think, is how we're going to begin, at least, is to simply enable a good commenting system on Point North itself so that we can have the discussions underneath the podcasts themselves. That seems like a productive way of doing it. We're not abstracting the conversation out to a forum, or we're not dragging it out to Facebook or something similar. We're kind of holding it together at Point North. That, I think, will make it easier to curate, will make it easier to gatekeep, I suppose, because we have to remember that we are on the wild internet after all. And that will help keep those conversations, I think, focused and positive and subtle and insightful, and all the things that we really look for. Yeah. Good. Good. Oh, yes. Drums of August was the famous World War I history book. Drums of August was Drums of Autumn is the Diana Gabaldon. It's the fourth book in the Outlander series. Yes, 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 yes. Good. Tamara is asking, what about Dusted? Well, Dusted. Dusted is not going to continue in its current form. Lonnie is launching over at Chipperish Media. Lonnie is launching a I don't remember which name she picked. She ran some names by me now. I don't remember which one she picked. I think it's Still Pretty is what she's going with. And that is going to be a series of, I think, 5 to 10 minute videos on YouTube where she gives her responses to the episodes. And that's, I think, a really interesting thing. And of course, her perspective on Buffy is valuable and fascinating and entertaining and all of those wonderful things. So that's going to be great. That's how she's approaching that. I think I'm going to do something a little different. I think I'm going to do something that allows me to get a little deeper into it. And this may be something we're talking about it. I'm talking about this with the co-host of Dusted, Sarah Kate Pizant, who is delightful and brilliant and enthusiastic and just desperately acute and insightful. We're talking about doing a series of long, rambling, sprawling conversations about Buffy the Vampire Slayer, where effectively we would sit down over, I don't know, a bottle of wine or a case of beer or something, and just talk about season 1. Talk about it in its entirety, and have that be a 2 or 3 hour conversation. And then maybe a month later, gather together again to talk about season 2 in its entirety. And my intent would be to discuss every single season of Buffy, every single season of Angel, and then maybe even to continue onward into things like Dollhouse. I think that would be fascinating, specifically as a counterpoint to Buffy, as a counterpoint to the way in which we discuss Buffy. And those of you who perhaps found Sarah through Dusted may like to know that Sarah and Vinton, who is right here in the chat, and the wonderful Elizabeth Stevens, the aforementioned Elizabeth Stevens, is they have a great show over on commonroomradio.com called Mighty Fine Shindig, where they discuss every episode of Firefly. I guest on a couple of those episodes, you guys. It's a really fun show. I can't recommend that highly enough. Good. Good. Megan says, yes, please. Love Dusted. We'll be listening to Still Pretty and enjoyed Sarah literally anything about Buffy. Good. Maybe including the Buffy comics, says Anna. That's a really great idea. That would actually be a fantastic forum for discussing the Buffy comics. Yes. Yes, and maybe even some of the non-canonical Buffy comics. Some of the novels are, I would hesitate to call any of the novels, really good, but I do think that they're interesting. And a one-shot discussion about the movement of the story within the frame of the novel could be really, really good. John Sanchez asks the question that haunts me my days and nights. Any plans for Game of Thrones? Plans? No. A real and inevitable interest? Yes. I will talk about Game of Thrones at some point. I will talk about the books. I will talk about the show. I don't know exactly how that's going to unfold. I would really like to do it after it's all done, but George R.R. Martin is taking his own sweet time. So I honestly don't know quite how that's going to play out. Ideally, in a perfect world, what I'd really like to do is talk about the first book, then talk about the first season, then talk about the second book and talk about the second season, and so on and so forth. But A, that is a 3-year commitment. And B, the thing isn't done yet. So if the show ends in a way that isn't just satisfactory for the show, but speaks well to the underlying narrative of the book too, and I don't know what that is, but I'll know it when I see it, then I might be willing to launch the series at that point after Tolkien has wrapped up, after we're done with There and Back Again. I don't think I can do 2 fantasy masterclasses at the same time. I think it would kill me. Oryx and Crake, says Frau Kathorp. Yes, that's absolutely on the list too. I would love to talk about that. Yes. Yes, good. Yeah. And Sophia Shelton says, I'm glad you're considering A Song of Ice and Fire in book form as well, because the show has driven me away so hard. I'm a huge fan of the books. I'm less a fan of the show. I think the show has made some completely understandable decisions, but those decisions have not always been for the best in terms of my own personal taste and my own personal interest in that narrative. But yes. If we're going to do Oryx and Crake, we need to do more Atwood, says Anna Keefe. Atwood is one of those writers. Atwood is one of those writers that I would really like to pull out and maybe make the subject of a seminar series. Maybe just pull her entire corpus and put that up to the public vote, and maybe even doing like survey seminars where instead of delving deep into a single text, we pull a number of texts and kind of skim them, so that in the course of 9 or 10 or 11 or 12 weeks, we would do maybe 3 novels by the same author, so we could look at the development of that author's work, or look at the devolution of that author's work. I think there are a number of different approaches there that would pay dividends. That's definitely interesting. And Margaret Atwood, of course. I mean, of course, you guys, way at the top of the list right now. Carla is asking, any plans for Terry Pratchett? Yes. Though the problem with Pratchett, there is no problem with Pratchett. Pratchett is fantastic. The problem with discussing Pratchett in this kind of setting is that I have 2 simultaneous impulses. And the first is to talk about everything. And the second is to talk about it in some depth. And those 2 impulses obviously conflict, because let's be honest, I could spend the next decade moving through the Discworld series at a glacial pace, and the Discworld series would absolutely justify that, but there is an opportunity cost associated with that kind of endeavor. So I'm certainly thinking about seeding the Discworld books into the annual seminar schedule in much the same way as the Harry Potter books are seeded in. Like, we can vote on which book we want to discuss, we can raise new subjects, we can try new things, but once a year, at least, we're going to do the next Harry Potter novel. And that's, I think, a perfectly good way of doing it. And maybe what I'd like to do is pick a time of year, or maybe pick 2 times a year. Maybe say every 6 months we'll do the next Pratchett. Every 6 months we'll take 6 weeks and do the next Pratchett. I think that's really engaging, though there are questions too about linearity when you're discussing Pratchett. Do you do them in release order? Do you do them in shorter series where you talk about all of the Watch novels and all of the Witch novels, and you talk about all of the Unseen University novels? I can see advantages, you guys. If I had to guess right now, if I had to, make a declarative statement right now, it would simply be that at least once a year, we will do the next Discworld book in the series, regardless of what that Discworld book is. And we'll just track through until we're done. And I know there are 50 Discworld books and we're going to be here for quite some time, but doing it while also creating space for the other things that I want to do. I suppose the alternate approach that I was thinking about was very much like the Buffy approach, where once a month, we basically do a Terry Pratchett book club. And once a month, we sit down and we have a discussion about the next Pratchett book in the list. I have read all of them. Is that true? I have read all of them. Yes, I have read all of them. So I can come to that fairly comfortably, but I know that that's a huge reading commitment for people who haven't read all of them, because you don't want to spend the next 4 years of your life reading nothing but Pratchett either. Or, hey, maybe you do. And if you do, congratulations to you, because you probably should. Yes. Good. Yeah, we're talking here about The Handmaid's Tale too. I saw the trailer as well. That would also be a really interesting book to study in terms of the adaptation. That would be fascinating. Yes, yes. Sarah says you could also do a genre survey like detectives, and then bringing a variety of media that uses that as a framework. Sarah, you read my mind. Mystery fiction is absolutely something I'm interested in doing a survey series on. Maybe taking 10 weeks looking at the origins of mystery, looking at how the mystery novel was developed and codified, and how it transitioned as we moved through the 20th and into the 21st centuries. I think that would be fascinating. Certainly doing that with mystery, doing that with fantasy, doing that with science fiction, doing that with horror, I think would be revelatory. And also, of course, looking beyond books. I think it would be fascinating to study science fiction on television, or science fiction in movies, study romance in movies, study the rise and the fall of the rom-com. I think all of these would be really interesting topics, and certainly all of them will be up for discussion in the future. Yes. And I should say too, within that we'll definitely be looking at some movies, and we'll definitely be looking at some TV shows too within the seminar format, which is something that I haven't done yet. Obviously, I've podcasted a lot about movies and TV shows, but there are some shows out there that I would really like to take a closer and more acute critical eye to. So I'm looking forward to that. Yes. Good. Let me see here. Dresden Files, says Angela. Certainly Dresden Files is up there too. Stormfront did very well in the last vote. Yes, I enjoy the Dresden Files very much. I like Jim Butcher's work very much. There's a lot there that I want to talk about. Again, there's a lot of books. Not quite sure how I would get to them, but certainly I'm interested in that. Yes, yes. I'd even like to talk about the series, actually, because I find the series not good, but fascinating. And sometimes that's better. Yes. Graham Green says Fraucastor. Absolutely. Yes. Yes. Good. Excellent. Okay. I think we are. Excuse me. Gosh. Here's my voice starting to fail me now. 40 minutes in. Well, I think this is where we are. Oh. Stranger Things and Babylon 5 and BSG and Star Trek. You guys been reading my wish list? Is that what's happening right here? Okay, let's run through that really quickly. Stranger Things, yes, at least a one shot looking at the first season. At least a 2 to 3 hour lecture looking at the entirety of the first season, probably in advance of the second season. Almost certainly another similar lecture after the second season has run its course. I'm absolutely fascinated by that. I am in. Babylon 5 is, I mean, in many ways, my white whale. Babylon 5 is the show that I would like to podcast about more than maybe any other show. It's up there with Star Trek. It's up there with Farscape. There are a lot of things that I have to say about Babylon 5, and I would like to say all of them. Babylon 5 is dependent on me finding, I think maybe a good co-host. And when I say a good co-host, I am surrounded by good and talented co-hosts, let me tell you. But a co-host who is at least as passionate about Babylon 5 as I am. I'm also talking about a Doctor Who show. I'm definitely talking about a Star Trek show. There's a lot of conversation, of course, about story and Star Wars, which I'm very pleased to say will return next week. Next week will be the Rogue One lecture. And I have some big plans. I'm keeping my powder a little dry on the Rogue One stuff, on the story and Star Wars stuff, I should say, because I want to be sure of my commitment before I make any rash promises. It's a brand new world, you guys. But yes, I'm really curious about that. Oh, of course. And I should say, too, that Mandy is recording a podcast episode about Farscape Season 1 tomorrow for her fantastic podcast, Pop Culturally Deprived, which I cannot recommend highly enough. Mandy, if you can throw, I don't know if you're allowed, if you can throw the link to that in the YouTube chat here. I don't know if I can verify that or whatever, but it's a fantastic show. You should definitely check it out. Mandy is enormously talented and wonderful, and it's such a great idea for a show. The idea of the show is basically that week by week, she goes through things that everyone has seen except her. And it's lovely. And I can't wait to hear your thoughts on Farscape, Mandy. I am in. Asa, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I'm seeing Fringe pop up here. Fringe, definitely. Life is Strange, anything for narrative-driven video games, Life is Strange, etc. Yes, absolutely. One of the things that I really want to do here at Point North is expand the scope of the discussion and look at things which are perhaps unconventional in a narrative sense. And obviously the most interesting space there belongs to video games. I also want to talk a little about tabletop board games, and I want to talk a little about tabletop role-playing games. I want to talk about all the spaces where narrative enters our lives or is created spontaneously by us in the pursuit of other endeavors. One of the reasons that I really want to upgrade my video setup here is so that I can more readily stream video games, and so that I can stream. Life is Strange is way up there, let me tell you. Let me throw out a few more that I really want to talk about. I really want to talk about Brothers, A Tale of Two Sons. I really want to talk about Undertale. I really want to talk about the Stanley Parable, though that will probably have to wait like a year before I can get to that. I am personally a huge fan of the sprawling BioWare RPG games, so I will love to talk about Mass Effect and Dragon Age. It would be interesting to talk a little about World of Warcraft, for example. I think that there's some interesting narrative conceit and concession within the massively multiplayer space. So basically what I would like to do eventually, and I don't have concrete plans for this just yet, but what I would like to do eventually is effectively run a weekly show, run a weekly live stream where for an hour or two, I stream a game and talk about it, but talk about it narratively, talk about what the game is doing to deliver and to impart and to surrender agency to the player in terms of its story. That is fascinating. BioShock Infinite is a game that I am really eager to talk. I guess both BioShock 1 and BioShock Infinite, I'm really eager to talk about those games. So yes, that's definitely coming up. Rogue One live tweet, says Megan. Absolutely, that is happening. Excellent. A volunteer for a Babylon 5 co-host on Twitter. I don't even have Twitter open. Is someone tweeting at me about a Babylon 5 co-host? Because certainly I am in. Good. Yes. Dragon Age, says Nadia, is my favorite game ever. I'm a big fan. Tom from HR, Babylon 5 is your thing. Okay, Tom from HR, we definitely need to talk. Yes, good. Oh, and La Skipa is asking on Twitter, who has played We Happy Few? I have played a very little bit of We Happy Few. That is not a cheerful game. That is not a happy game to play. It's a very stark and depressing game. It is basically set in this alternate 1960s in which the world is technicolor and fantastic as long as you are taking the drugs that make you believe the world is technicolor and fantastic. And as soon as you stop taking those drugs, the world is revealed to be a dystopian nightmare. Unfortunately, everyone else is taking the drugs and really want you to take them too. It's real grim, except that then it kind of transitions into a weird survival horror game, which is not quite what I was looking for from it. I wanted a more, I don't know, constructed narrative experience from We Happy Few, which is why I dropped off basically after the intro sequence. But it is stunning. It is a good looking game. Yes. All right, Tom, we definitely need to talk about Babylon 5. Great. All right. This, I think, is going to do it. Do you have We Happy Few? I'm coming over. I actually don't have We Happy Few anymore. Maybe I do. Huh. I'll need to look into that. Vinton, you're invited always. Good. All right. I think we're going to wrap up there before my voice gives out entirely. But as I said, this is going to be a regular thing. If you have thoughts, if you have questions, if you have comments, if you would like to give me feedback on specific things or general things, if you have ideas for future shows, then please email pointnorthmedia@gmail.com. I will see all of those messages and I'll pull from those for next week's live session where we can hang out for a half hour, an hour, however long it takes. You can ask me questions about things that aren't directly related to Point North, I guess. You can ask me who would win in a fight, a Tyrannosaurus Rex or Shaq. That was the pull that I came to, guys. This is why I script these shows. That's where we are for tonight. Good. All right. Let's wrap it up there. Thank you all so much. And thank you for your support. The first few weeks for a new endeavor on the internet are absolutely pivotal because advertising on the internet is really tricky, you guys. It's not at all easy. And word of mouth is completely necessary. And you have all stepped up in the most astonishing and generous and fantastic way. And I am, as I said, thrilled and overcome and awed by all of you. You're making it possible for me to do this work and to continue these conversations. And I hope to do so for, well, for a very, very long time to come. Thank you all so much for your support. Do stay tuned over the weekend. Actually, it'll probably be Monday morning. I think sign up for the newsletter is probably the best thing to do. Monday morning, I'm going to announce our broadcast schedule for next week, including all of the special live sessions that I was discussing. If you really want to hear me talk about Scott Pilgrim versus the World, if you really want to hear me talk about the classic fantasy movie Willow, if you want to hear me talk about Rogue One and a number of other things, go subscribe to the newsletter or hang out on Twitter, hang out on Facebook. All of that information will be sent to all of the places. I will make it as easy as possible for you all to keep up with Point North. Until then, though, I should go and sip some more of this whiskey and rest my throat. I adore you all. Thank you all so much. I will talk to you all very soon.